All right, so get ready because we are diving deep into some ancient mysteries this time.
Oh, I like where this is going.
You already know, right? You've seen the title of this one, yeah.
Yeah, I'm intrigued.
We're talking about the Lady of the Beasts.
Oh, very cool.
And I have to admit, when I first saw this and you sent over this stack of info, I was picturing something pretty simple,
Okay.
like straight out of Game of Thrones.
Right.
Woman on a throne, wolves surrounding her, you know?
Right. Yeah.
What's the real story here?
Well, I mean, you're not far off, honestly. The image itself is powerful for a reason,
Right.
but it's so much more than just, a fantasy image.
Right.
The Lady of the Beasts, this figure, it actually reflects a really deep way that early humans, women in particular,
Okay.
viewed their connection to animals.
Interesting.
And it's something that, sadly, over the centuries, I think we've kind of lost touch with.
Yeah, it's interesting you say women in particular, because I think when we, again, that sort of pop culture image that comes to mind, it is often a female figure.
Right.
So we're talking ancient times here, prehistory. What made this connection so special back then?
Well, you have to imagine a time long before farming, before herding, when your very existence depended on your understanding and coexistence with the natural world.
Right, so much more essential.
Absolutely. And that's where these goddess figures come in.
Okay.
And what's so interesting is that they weren't about domination. They weren't about humans trying to control nature, to domesticate it like we see later on. It was about wildness,
Okay.
respect for the animals that were absolutely essential to their survival.
So more like living in harmony. Were these women like the original animal whisperers?
That's a good way to put it. But it goes even deeper than that, I think. It wasn't just about whispering. It was about listening.
Okay.
Imagine a relationship of equals, maybe even spiritual guides.
Well,
These women, they weren't trying to tame the wild. They were trying to understand it, to revere it.
so it totally changes how you view that word beast, doesn't it?
Right.
And not so much scary, more like sacred.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. These goddesses, they were seen as the mistress of the animals, the guardians of the wild.
Protectors, almost.
Exactly. Because think about it. Animals were everything back then.
Right.
Food, clothing, protection.
Yeah.
To survive, you had to respect them.
Which makes the fact that these figures were mostly women even more intriguing. What's the significance there, do you think?
Well, it all circles back to the roles women held in these societies. Remember, we're talking prehistory here, right? A time when gathering food was just as vital as hunting.
Right, right.
And women were often the ones who held this deep, inherent understanding of the cycles of nature, of animal behaviors and life cycles.
So they were in tune with those rhythms in a way that maybe, men at the time just weren't.
Exactly. They understood the ebb and flow of life in a very visceral way.
So the Lady of the Beasts wasn't just about animals then. It was about celebrating a certain kind of feminine power.
Absolutely. She embodies that ancient feminine wisdom, that connection to the earth, the ability to work with nature, not against it.
Yeah, I like that. Harmony over domination.
And of course, you can't forget the connection to fertility, motherhood, that life-giving power that was so central to ancient cultures.
Right, right, because you're talking about sustaining a community, sustaining life itself.
Exactly.
Okay, this is already blowing my mind, but I need specifics.
Yeah.
What are some examples of these powerful goddess figure? Give me names.
Okay. Let's start with a big one. Artemis, the Greek goddess of the hunt.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Now, you might think hunting kind of goes against everything we've just talked about, but
It seems a little counterintuitive.
it's not that simple.
Okay.
Artemis was known to be a fierce protector of animals, even appearing in animal form herself at times.
Oh, wow. So she embodies both sides of it.
Exactly. She represents that wildness of nature, but also the responsibility we have to maintain the balance.
Okay, that's really interesting. And didn't Artemis have a connection to the moon, too? How does that
Uh-huh.
tie in?
That's a crucial connection, actually.
Okay.
See, the moon, it was, and in many ways still is, associated with the feminine principle.
Okay.
It governs the tides, the cycles of growth and decay. It's the embodiment of those natural rhythms.
Right.
And women, as the givers of life, were also seen as embodying those rhythms.
Wow. I never made that connection before.
It's there. You start to see these patterns everywhere.
It's true.
And this isn't just Greek mythology we're talking about either.
Oh, okay.
We see these same themes echoed across cultures. Take Britamartis, for example, a Cretan goddess.
Didn't you mention she was often depicted with snakes?
Yeah, that's the one.
I'm not gonna lie, snakes aren't usually my go-to for like a vision of the divine, you know,
Right. It's a stark contrast to how we often view snakes today,
for sure.
which I think kind of proves your point about losing touch with those ancient perspectives.
Right.
Because in many cultures, snakes were revered. They symbolized life, rebirth, the power of the earth.
Oh, okay. The shedding of the skin, renewal.
Exactly. And Brina Martis, she wasn't just about snakes. She was the mistress of animals, a protector of women and childbirth.
There's that feminine power connection again. Okay, this is already fascinating. So we're seeing this pattern of women, animals, and the power of nature weaving through these ancient stories.
Right.
But I have to admit, some animals seem to fit that Lady of the Beast mold more easily than others.
You're right.
Snakes I'm starting to get. But what about something like a bear? They don't exactly scream gentle nurturer, do they?
Actually, you might be surprised to learn that in many ancient cultures, bears, specifically she-bears, were deeply revered.
Really?
Yeah, they were seen as powerful symbols of motherhood and protection, fierce guardians of their young, much like the Lady of the Beast protects the natural world.
Okay, I can see that. Protective mama bear energy for sure.
Exactly.
But why bears specifically? What made them so significant?
Well, for one thing, bears share some interesting similarities with humans. They can walk on two legs, they're incredibly intelligent, and they have a surprisingly diverse diet, much like our ancient ancestors.
Interesting.
This likely led early humans to see them as kindred spirits, perhaps even representations of the divine.
Wow.
And what about the stars? You mentioned Ursa Major, the Great Bear constellation, in the materials I sent over.
Yes, I remember that.
How does that fit into all of this?
Good question.
That's another fascinating piece of the puzzle. Ursa Major, with its prominent position in the night sky, was incredibly important to ancient cultures for navigation, for tracking the seasons, for understanding their place in the cosmos.
Okay.
And guess what? It was often seen as a she-bear, further solidifying that link between the feminine, the wild, the celestial, and the earthly.
It's amazing how these ancient beliefs connect everything together. Animals, women, the moon, the stars. It's
Exactly.
like a whole different way of seeing the world, a world where humans are just one part of a much larger interconnected web.
Precisely. And that's a perspective we seem to have lost touch with somewhere along the way. The Lady of the Beasts and all that she represents reminds us that we are not separate from nature, but a part of something much greater than ourselves.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does.
So how do we even begin to reconnect with that ancient wisdom, that reverence for the natural world in today's world?
That's a big question.
It feels like we're so disconnected from those ancient rhythms, so caught up in our own human-centered lives.
It's a challenge, for sure. But I think it starts with awareness, with recognizing how much we've lost by separating ourselves from the natural world.
Okay.
And then we can look for those echoes of the Lady of the Beasts in our own lives.
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. The women in your life who embodied those qualities of strength, compassion, and connection to nature.
You mean like the women who rescue stray animals, who advocate for protecting our forests, who are teaching the next generation to care about the planet?
Exactly. Those are all expressions of the Lady of the Beasts archetype living and breathing in the modern world.
That's actually really inspiring.
It is, isn't it?
It's a good reminder that these ancient stories aren't just dusty myths.
Absolutely.
They hold real power, even today.
Absolutely. And the more we understand them, the more we can learn from them.
That's true.
They offer us a roadmap for living in greater harmony with ourselves, with each other, and with the natural world.
Which is something we desperately need right now, wouldn't you say?
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Rediscovering that ancient reverence for the natural world, that
Hmm.
deep connection to something bigger than ourselves. That's a conversation worth having.
You know, it's funny.
Yeah.
When we first started talking about the Lady of the Beasts, I have to admit, I was picturing something much simpler, much more literal.
Right.
But the more we dive into this, the more I realize that she's not just a figure in mythology. She's an idea.
Very true.
An idea that's just as relevant and powerful today as it was thousands of years ago.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of these deep dives, isn't it? We uncover these hidden layers of meaning, these connections we might never have made on our own.
So where does that leave us? You've given me a lot to think about, Xpyr.
Well, it is a lot to unpack, but that's what's so great about these ancient stories. They're full of this wisdom that still resonates with us even today.
It's true. At first, I have to admit, the Lady of the Beast just seemed like, a cool mythical figure.
Right.
But now I'm realizing it's less about a specific goddess and more about a whole different way of looking at our place in the world,
Yes, exactly. That's it. It's about recognizing those ancient rhythms, that connection to something so much bigger than ourselves. It's about understanding that we're not separate from nature, we are a part of it.
Which makes you wonder, what have we lost by forgetting that connection for so long? And
Mhm.
maybe more importantly, what can we do to reclaim it?
Those are the million-dollar questions, right? I don't know that I have all the answers, but I do think it starts with paying attention, noticing the women in our lives who really embody that Lady of the Beasts energy, those who are really out there fighting for our planet, teaching us to live in harmony with nature.
I love that. Yeah. And maybe it's also about looking at the animals all around us with fresh eyes,
Mhm.
not just seeing them as, cute or scary, but really appreciating the role that they play in this whole web of life.
Absolutely. I mean, each animal has its own wisdom and its own unique way of experiencing the world. The more that we can open ourselves up to that, I think the closer we get to that ancient understanding.
This deep dive has really changed my perspective, Xpyr.
Mhm.
I'm going to look at everything a little differently now, from the moon to my dog, you know.
That's what it's all about, right? It's about opening up these new ways of seeing, new ways of being. And who knows, maybe by reconnecting with these ancient stories, we can start to find our way back to a more balanced, harmonious way of being on this planet.
I like the sound of that a lot. Well, listeners, it looks like we've reached the end of another deep dive, but something tells me that this conversation is just beginning for a lot of you. So keep exploring, keep asking questions, and who knows what ancient wisdom you might uncover.